Funding for Brampton Memories of a Small Town has been brought to you in part by the Rotary Clubs of Brampton.
Hello, I'm Michael Seaman of the Brampton Heritage Board, and welcome to Brampton, Memories of a Small Town. When dealing with Canadian history, there is one factor which has been a dominant influence on the way our country has evolved physically and socially over the years: the pioneers. They were the ones which cleared the land, founded our first communities, and established a social and moral order which is the base of our own today. As has been frequently the case, the pioneering spirit has been passed down over the years, and thus we see successive generations of these pioneering families continuing to play important roles in their communities. In the former town and surrounding rural areas, which now make up the city, we have several families which fit into this mould. Among them, the Elliots, the Archdeacons, McBeans, Churches, Snells, and numerous others. In today's show, we are going to look at one of the best known of these pioneer families, the Huttons, and the village which bears their name, Huttonville. Who better to talk on this subject than Councillor John Hutton, the great-great-grandson of the Scots pioneer Alexander Hutton, who settled in Chincoosea Township with his wife Mary in 1829. I'd like to welcome Councillor John Hutton. Councillor Hutton, when did your family first come to settle in Chincoosea Township?
The Huttons moved to Chincoosea Township first in 1829. They originally came from Scotland in the Fifeshire area, and they were originally settled in the early 1820s in Quebec. They were there for 4 or 5 years. I presume they didn't prosper in Quebec, so they heard about land being available close to Toronto, so they moved up to this area, settled. The land that they settled on is on Credit View Road, where the Bonnie Brae homestead still stands, the homestead that they originally started. For the first 2 or 3 years, they wintered in Toronto and would come out in the summertime to farm, carrying all their possessions over their shoulders because there were no roads there at that time, until they did that for, I think, a couple of years, until the house was habitable and fit for living through the wintertime. Originally in a log cabin for some time, and then they built what is now Bonnie Brae and still stands on Credit View Road. Mm-hmm. Beautiful house, which we still take pride in going through the house and seeing parts of the house which were built by each of the sons. They each contributed a part where there's a door built by one of the sons, cabinets built by another son, closets and this type of thing. They all still have their mark of, they were all very handy. Unlike myself, they were extremely handy, good carpenters, and they were able to build a house and build a very beautiful house, which is still standing and still very beautiful. The Huttons have spread far and wide, but every year 1 or 2 will come back and sort of a pilgrimage to Bonnie Brae.
How did the Hutton family first come to be involved in the establishment of Huttonville, and how did it come by that name?
Well, Huttonville originally had several names. Most prominent, I think, was Wolf Den. J.P. Hutton bought the mill in 1855. It had been started by Mr. Brown in 1849. In 1855, J.P. bought the mill and made a lot of improvements and expansion to the mill. And at that time, they changed the name of the village. I guess the wolves moved out with civilization. It was a densely forested area at the time, heavy pine forest, according to the Peel County Historic Atlas. The wolves moved out, so they called it Huttonville. Most of the villages around this area have been named after the millers If any place in Peel, you'll go to Cooksville or Streetsville, any place like that. The mill was the big industry, and so they named the village after the miller, J.P. Hutton.
Looking through the early history of the area, one of the most active of the Huttons appears to have been J.P. and his son J.O. Hutton. Can you tell us something about these two gentlemen?
Well, J.P. he's written up in the Historic Atlas for the advancements he made. The mill here at the time was the largest shingle producer between Toronto and Hamilton, and employed many, many people. At the time, the village had 150 people in it at the time, and a great many of them were employed by J.P. And his son J.O. started a mill, a woolen reclaiming mill. He reclaimed fibers and may have been the first recycler in Peel County at the time, and he started a mill to reclaim fibers for the woolen trade. That building is still standing. It was purchased in the early part of this century by McMurtry family, and they ran it up until the 40s, up until the wartime. For some reason, the men were known by their initials. James Patterson Hutton was the original. He was known as J.P. Hutton. He married Jemima Wirtz from Meadowvale of Gooderham and Wirtz fame. They had a mill in Meadowvale as well. Son James Oscar, or J.O. Hutton, was the one who put the lights into Brampton. He had a dynamo generator, and he had a 2,200 volt transmission line, which he introduced the first electric light to Brampton. In 1886, Brampton Council agreed to install 18 lights, and he was paid $72.22 a year per lamp for these 18 lights. They were to be turned off at 12:30 in the morning, and they didn't come on if the moon was full and there was no clouds. That was part of the contract. So Huttonville has shown the light to Brampton for many, many years, and they continued to supply the electricity to Brampton until 1905, when Brampton Hydro, or at that time Ontario Hydro, purchased the power plant from James O. Hutton.
There are a number of interesting historical sites and features in Huttonville. Can you tell us about some of them?
Certainly, the mill, of course, is probably the most noticeable, the most prominent feature, but the church also has great historic merit. The church, the store, which is now known as the ice cream parlor, was the, we see back here, has always been the post office, the village general store and the post office, and now is known far and wide as probably some of the best ice cream in Peel County. People make trips to the village just for the ice cream, or certainly stop when their trips through the village. The house that J.P. built, still standing. It's still in very, very good condition, owned by Malcolm Jarvie, and running a business called Hutton House Clocks there, and it's still in very, very beautiful shape. He's kept it in very good shape. There are several houses along the main street that are all very, very historic significance. They're all very close to the street, as was the houses were built in those days. There wasn't heavy traffic, footpath and horse traffic in those days, so they built the houses close to the street. And I like to think about Huttonville as Brampton's tourist area. Really, I think the only tourist area Brampton has, because of the many people that come from Toronto, Mississauga, surrounding areas to pick their own strawberries, apples, and this type of thing, and get fresh fruit and vegetables at the farms, which are filling the area because they're there because of the unique soil conditions. We have a special, it's called fox sand loam, which it seems to follow the river, the Credit River along, and it's necessary for production of tender fruits and fruit and vegetables and this type of thing. So it's a very, very prosperous farming area, or has been a prosperous farming area. The soil is excellent. I can remember back when I was small, we had asparagus. A lot of asparagus was grown in this area. My father produced asparagus, and most of the growers around here did, and I used to bring it just down here to the corner of Mississauga and Embleton. A lady named Mrs. Countryman looked after. She took all the asparagus and weighed it and truck would come from Collingwood to pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
But it was hard to compete with American imports. They had jump on us by the season and everything, so cheaper labor and this type of thing. So there's very little asparagus grown in this area now. However, there's large tracts of strawberries and apples, that type of thing. And we have one large grower of spinach who's got very extensive holding. His specialty crop. The soil is just right for that as well.
In the early part of this century, I've heard that Huttonville and the Huttonville Park was an important tourist destination for travellers from Toronto.
Yes, in the 30s and 40s they used to do remotes quite often. They had, in those days, big bands and this type of thing would come out. Dancing would take place with Saturday night dances and then Sunday night sing-alongs. I can remember that as a youngster going to everybody went to the Sunday night sing-along. Later on in the 50s, late 40s and 50s, we had square dancing at the school, and across from the school there was buildings that are still standing that were erected to house farmerettes. These were girls that came in the war years to help with the farm crops. They came from all over Ontario, and there was a big cooking facility for them, a big building that was their dining hall, and then smaller buildings for their Quonset hut type of things for their sleeping accommodations. And we'd have square dances in the main dining hall, which went on for quite a number of years. That was something united the community as well.
To this day, Huttonville still manages to maintain the character of an attractive rural village. Can you tell us why this is?
A large part of the reason is because there are still several families that have been here since the beginning. There are a lot of pioneer families, not just in the village itself, but in the area. It's a very stable community. Doesn't change much. The children of the descendants of pioneers and their children and their children's children a lot of them have settled here. They're still here. The farming community is still maintained. The crops may change. Right now we have a lot of greenhouses that have gone up in the last 30, 40 years. It's a very extensive greenhouse area. We've got into nursery crops as well. Still that good backbone of farming, farm community with pioneer families that don't want to move. They like the village. It's a great place to live, to bring up a family. And Huttonville will be here for a long, long time.
Thank you for joining us for our tour of Huttonville and the Bonnie Brae Farm. We'll be right back after the break with another look at another of Brampton's historical scenes.
Funding for Brampton Memories of a Small Town has been brought to you in part by the Rotary Clubs of Brampton.
Welcome back to Brampton Memories of a Small Town. While in this series we have been concentrating primarily on our architectural heritage and the history which can be read from it, in this show we will be looking at another feature of Brampton's heritage resources, which can also tell us about the past, pioneer cemeteries. Grave markers and monuments are exceptionally valuable cultural artifacts, revealing artistic and social concerns of our predecessors in landscapes that are often of exceptional charm. They provide a direct link with our most significant historical figures, and particularly in the case of our rural areas, may be the last remaining evidence of the existence and composition of former villages. Today we will be visiting the Churchville Cemetery, which is probably one of the best of Brampton's pioneer cemeteries in terms of historical significance and landscape. And it is recognised as such by a designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. I'm now talking to Marianne Galliford, Secretary-Treasurer of the Churchville Cemeteries Board. Marianne, can you tell me something of the history of the Churchville Cemetery?
Okay, the cemetery, this part we're standing in, is 1822, August the 2nd. It was a crown grant from King George V. And The back part of the cemetery, which we're looking into, we acquired in 1892. So that's the new part of the cemetery, and you're in the old part right now. We have nothing in the way of registration on this part of the cemetery other than what you can glean off the stones yourself.
The Churchville Cemetery is still in use today. Wouldn't you say it's an important link with Churchville's past?
Yes, it is, because at one point this was the only cemetery, so anybody that ever lived in Churchville would more than likely be buried here. So we meet the families, we meet the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren that come up here to look for their heritage. Peel Board has a lot of their classes come in here to do a bit of a history of the region of Peel.
Besides the graves and the headstones, what are some of the other interesting features of the Churchville Cemetery?
Probably the layout of the cemetery, the location of it. As I say, we've got the old part of the cemetery, plus the new part. The road that is now being put in is the original road. We've gone back to the 1822 surveys to put the road in properly. And we're slowly, the more we look into it, the more we dig up. In the way of history, we have a paupers area, which is probably 200 to 300 graves that we have no records on. It's just strictly hearsay that it was in the late 1800s a plague came through and killed off quite a few people.
The Churchville Cemetery is designated under the Heritage Act. How does this affect you in your operation of the Churchville Cemetery?
We've applied for over 7 years to get designation as a historical cemetery because we felt there may be more funding through the government that way. We discovered we were wrong. But we did get our plaque, and it's just the idea that we can keep the cemetery open and have it as a historical site. And it gave us a wee bit of money at that point of time through public donation to fix up the graves.
I'm now talking to Dale Ward, who's a member of the Brampton Heritage Board and a member of the Ontario Genealogical Society, Halton Peel Branch. Welcome, Dale.
Hi, Michael.
Dale, what is the Peel Genealogical Society and how is it involved in cemeteries?
Well, locally here it's the Halton Peel branch of the Ontario Genealogical Society. It's a group of people that's the hobby is to trace their family roots, their history back through not only just the local area of Halton and Peel, Ontario, but to take those roots back to, in most cases here, it would be back to Ireland, Scotland, and England. One of the things that finds me out here today is because cemeteries are a key resource for us to start our research on. I know that a lot of people don't like cemeteries, but I find them a very, very interesting place, and sometimes almost park-like. Yeah.
What sort of activities are you involved in to record the history of cemeteries?
Well, the main part is to transcribe the stones themselves. There's much more information on the stone, foot markers and things that you find in a cemetery than you find in the burial record. Because the cemetery is really only interested in recording the person's name and when they were buried. It's a legal requirement and a record that they have to do. The stone themselves will give us the information that tells us the date of death, hopefully to the day, the same with the birth. And the early pioneers, if we're lucky, have been proud enough of their heritage to show just when and where they were born and came to Canada. That is a great find for somebody who's looking to find the history back in Ireland or Scotland. Those countries are quite large, and over the years they've had large populations, and to trace a very common name, you need to have a county, shire, or parish, which they might put on the stone.
Many of the oldest stones are made of materials such as marble and limestone, which are subject to deterioration with today's pollution. What sort of things do you do to maintain and preserve the stones?
Well, the Ontario Genealogical Society, to preserve what is on the stones, is trying to record, transcribe all of what's on the stones, not necessarily the verse that's at the bottom of it, but the the people, their information, the fact that they were mothers, fathers, grandparents, etc., which might be put on. But to preserve the stone, the stones are so soft that weathering without acid rain is something that's going to deteriorate and make it that it's not readable. Acid rain is a more serious problem in that it's attacking some of the more harder stone. And I think that the only thing that we can do is to try to stabilize and make it safe, and to just record what's on that for future generations. Mm-hmm. The stone, for example, just behind us, you find that a lot of it is unreadable by the naked eye. We have to use chalk to keep it there and be able to read it and transcribe it. The reason that I say you can't preserve the stone itself is that if you treat it, you could be attacking it and it deteriorates even faster. Mm-hmm. Some of the people have decided that they'd like to paint the recessions in the stone, but again, I think that this is something that you have to be very careful. Mm-hmm. If you don't treat it with the right product, it's going to eat more of the stone away faster.
Mm. Could you point out some of the more notable and interesting stones in the Churchville Cemetery?
There's a wooden marker here, and it's Mr. Church. And I'm always having trouble with some of the early names. Amaziah, and he was the first buried in this cemetery, and that was in 1831. The man was 65 years at the time. Not far from his stone is another one which is a genealogical delight, Frances W. Consort, which is the wife of Robert Calder. This lady was born in Newburyport, Mass. In 1771. She was married in New Hampshire in 92 and died here at the age of 81, 1852. And the stone goes on to say, and I don't know whether it's readable today, as this was taken down a few years ago, she embraced the religion of the Gospel of Christ and joined the Methodist Church in 1801 and remained an accepted member until death. Another one which shows some of the things is that William Elliot, 1837-88, was a member for Peel in 78 to 82. Another one, John Elliot, M.D., graduate and silver medalist at the University of Toronto in the late corner of the county of Welland. A lot of these things that people put on to commemorate their ancestors or their loved ones and their own heritage are very valuable for family historians. And these are the things that we want to make sure are preserved. That is the heritage that I feel is as important as the heritage of the buildings and now the culture and also the natural landscape that we have in the city.
Thank you for joining us for Brampton Memories of a Small Town. Join us again next week when we'll be back with another heritage building.
Funding for Brampton Memories of a Small Town has been brought to you in part by the Rotary Clubs of Brampton.
To comment on the preceding program, please call the response line 24 hours a day at 456-0860. Your comments are appreciated.